Thank you very much. That's a marvelous introduction. It's super. I don't know if I can live up to it, but it's great. I tell you, this convention is a great convention. I mean, it's really unusual. I'm not just saying it because it's another convention I attended, because there are two unique things about it. One, for Libertarian Party conventions. One is, today is the first time, today and tonight, I heard a Libertarian Party official at any convention call for more members. That's fantastic. It's an unusual situation. You might think it's puzzling why it's unusual. That's an interesting question. Why indeed? Actually, welcoming and calling for new membership. That's a great spirit in itself. There are too many parties, and I'm not going to mention the names in order to protect the guilty. There are many state parties which don't want to grow in membership. We have enough members. We have 20 members. Why do we need more? Rather strange attitude. And the second great thing about the Michigan convention here is that the first convention I remember since the 1970s. I've attended every national convention since 1975. And there are many state conventions, not every one, but many. It's the first convention since the 70s which focuses on ideas of liberty and how you apply it to the real world. The first time. It's a very unusual situation, so I applaud that. It's just great. Talk about ideas. What else did they talk about? I don't know. But so I hope this sparks a trend of returning to talking about ideas at Libertarian Party conventions. Okay, I'll start with just the general. One question always comes up, which has often come up at any rate. What's the purpose of the Libertarian Party? I keep getting questions like, should our purpose be to get more votes? Should it be to win elections? Should it be to spread ideas? I never understand the dichotomy here. I always figure all of the above is my answer. That's the whole point. We grow in membership, advance the ideas, get more votes, and eventually get elected and mold back the Leviathan state. That I figure is the whole point of the exercise here. So I can never understand why there should be any kind of split in this. And these aims. It seems to me that the ultimate purpose, of course, of the Libertarian Party is the political action arm of the Libertarian movement, and it's the arm which applies libertarianism to politics and electoral politics. And the idea is eventually to roll back the state, and this is our method of doing it. It seems to me that the basic strategy we should employ is to, and this again is a question always comes up. What sort of strategy? Seems to me the basic strategy is to keep the ideas aloft of our ultimate goal, ultimate principle, and try to achieve them and try to get toward it as fast as possible. This would seem to be almost banal, but it seems to be a controversial in the movement. There are two. Marxists work this out. Marxists are very good strategic theorists. As a matter of fact, before they started collapsing about a few years ago, they spent most of their time arguing about strategy, not about principle or whatever, but simply how to approach, how to change the world, how to take a situation which they were very much opposed to, and how to bring about a very different one. And the Marxists identified two basic deviations, so to speak, two basic erroneous strategies, and I would endorse this with, of course, a different twist. One is what they call opportunism, which I think is often rampant in the movement. And what happens there, I've seen this happen in many libertarian organizations, since I've been around the movement for about 43 years I've been a libertarian. Good God. At any rate, what happens is, your goal is to advance the ideas of liberty, that's the objective, okay? And you want to do it as rapidly as possible and as effectively as possible. And so you try to build an organization which will accomplish that. And what begins to happen, sometimes very quickly and other times after a long period of time, it begins to happen as subtle or sometimes sudden shift of emphasis. So the ends become the means become the end. The objective, which had been advancing liberty, now becomes keeping the organization going, keeping the payrolls going. And so, then you change the output in order to maximize your input, so to speak. So the ends and means are transposed. As my friend Wally Harper used to say, one of my early mentors in the movement, that is when the organization takes on the dimensions of a racket. You claim you're advancing freedom. Instead of that, you're simply building your own salaries. So that's one problem that keeps popping up. Only eternal vigilance and realizing the problem, I think, can stop it. The other problem is sort of the opposite problem, which is Marxists called sectarianism. In other words, only saying, okay, we want only talking about the ultimate goal and never talking about any kind of transition to it. I think the best, most extreme example of that is the old, fairly lovable socialist party called the Socialist Labor Party. I don't know if anybody here has heard of it. For good reason, nobody's ever heard of it. But at any rate, the Socialist Labor Party has been in existence since about 1890 or so. They've gotten no place, and their strategic outlook is simply to publish one pamphlet. And the one pamphlet has different headlines. They keep up to date. Their outreach program is to change the title. In other words, they'll say, "Are you worried about? Are you worried about nuclear war, pollution, unemployment, whatever the situation is?" And then they reprint the same pamphlet, and the answer is socialism. Scrap capitalism and on to socialism. That's it. It's the pamphlet. So it hasn't been very effective. It doesn't really grab. It's not a grabber. Okay. And there are a lot of libertarians, I think, who tend to have that same emphasis. Okay, smash the state. That's it, and without any kind of intervening analysis. Okay. Well, how do we? So what do I think is the correct strategy, so to speak? I think the correct strategy is to hold the ultimate goal objective, always keep it in mind, and then offer what the Marxists call transition programs. Okay. So the transition program to a taxless United States is abolishing the income tax. It's a good, solid transition program. Go for that. Been willing to live with that for a few years before pressing on. So that's the transition program. However, they have a couple of criteria, important criteria for transition program. One, it should be consistent with the objective, with the goal. Okay, I think it's very important. This is what liberals mean when they say the means should not contradict the ends. I think it's clumsily worded, but basically it's that you advance a transition program. It shouldn't undercut the ultimate objective. So you don't, for example, if you want to abolish the income tax, you don't say we should have a huge sales tax, because first of all, usually happens you have both. You wind up with both. See, our objective is not to help the state along and try to advance this program. Our objective is to try to whittle it down. Okay, so that's one thing. Should any proposals advance should not contradict the ultimate objective. And the second thing, the means should be pretty radical. Okay, the transition program shouldn't be so moderate that everybody snoozes off. I have a couple of examples from the early days of the Libertarian Party. The Libertarian Party really first flourished in New York City, the heartland, of course, of libertarianism, as we all know. With a stunning mayoralty race in 1973, Fran Youngstein got 9,000 votes or something, which was great for that time. And so, buoyed up by this resurgence, they decided to run for governor the next year. Jerry Tuccilli ran for governor. They decided on a soft core program because they really thought they were going to either win or at least get a lot of votes. You have to appeal to the public. Soft core program. So Tuccilli, I forget who the other turkeys were ran against them, Democrat or Republican. But at any rate, it was 1974, and Tuccilli's great radical program was we should cut taxes. Cut state tax. Well, big deal. I mean, both the Republican and Democrat also said the same thing. So we were stuck with a situation where you have the Republicans and Democrats both saying we should cut taxes. Taxes are too big. And meantime, this radical, crazy new party also says the same thing. What's the point of voting for the radical, crazy new party if they don't offer any alternative? Okay, so naturally, it was a big flopperoo with lots of hysteria coming out of it. And Tuccilli left the party shortly thereafter. A disillusioned, broken man. And the New York Party has been declining ever since. I mean, every year it gets fewer votes. But at any rate, there's no point in selling out in that manner because you don't offer an alternative. There's no point in calling for 2% income tax cut, things like that. There were many great things about the Clark campaign in 1980, but the content was not one of them. The content was Clark offered the big centerpiece of the Clark campaign, which is very well funded, and a lot of TV ads, which you haven't had since. The centerpiece of the Clark campaign was a 30% income tax cut. Unfortunately, Reagan was saying the same thing. He was also offering a 30% income tax cut. The question is, if a Republican who has a good chance to win offers a 30% cut, and a Libertarian who's a crazy new party also says we're in favor of a 30% cut, who's the average anti-tax person going to vote for? Well, the answer is obvious. It ain't us. So that's the sort of thing. We have to offer a clear-cut, radical alternative to the existing system to give people a reason to vote for us, to break their habits of a lifetime and vote for some kooky new party. Okay, so that's, I think, the strategic guidelines there. So the Libertarian Party, now we begin to get to the controversial stuff. This speech. Libertarian Party has what I consider a great platform. It was built up over many years. I'm one of the architects of it. I was on the platform committee for many years. And we built it up as specifically to take our principles, which are our great principles, and apply them to political issues. Okay? Because to make the connection, and just say you're in favor of freedom is not enough. It's great, it's fine, but it's only the first step. Okay, you guys are in favor of freedom. How do you apply it? Okay, here's where we apply it. Bing, bing, bing. Well, this upset a lot of people, including many libertarians, and it's a constant call for either getting rid of the platform, which is almost impossible to do because the way the bylaws are structured, once the thing is frozen in the platform, it's almost impossible to get rid of it. And the other proposal, which unfortunately carries, to have a program, which is a short platform, which essentially is an end run around it, to appeal to the average person because the platform is considered too radical. So what you have, you're beginning to get something like a 2% income tax cut. In other words, you're beginning to get to the point where who cares anymore. So that, I think, should be combated. I think the platform is a great platform, and I urge you all to read it. It's true. See, the complaints are that it's too long. It's much shorter than the Republican and Democratic platforms. Believe me, those are a couple hundred pages apiece, and this is still fairly short. One of the things which has puzzled me for a long time, I've not received an answer yet. I'm open to any kind of suggestions. I'm not open to many things. This is one of the things I'm open to. And that is, why is it that the voters apply a much different standard to us than they do to the Democrats or Republicans? They vote for the Democrat or Republican, well, this guy's a little bit better for him. Yet with us, they say, well, you have 100 positions, I disagree violently with one of them, therefore I won't vote for you. Why do they do that? Why do they have to agree with every damn one of the planks until they vote for us? I still don't understand this. Maybe psychobabble has a place after all, kind of explain this. Gene Burns, who was a sometime candidate for president, I think he was just a great candidate, and unfortunately things happened and he never continued to be nominated to the nomination. He has a great concept. By the way, he's one of the greatest speakers I've ever heard, bar in any party. Anyway, his concept was a freedom train concept, which I think is terrific. Namely, he said this, of course, much better than I do. So he's a radio talk show host, and he has a great voice. He said, basically, look, if you don't agree, we have a freedom train. We're going on the way to freedom. I invite you to get on the train. If you don't like what after we go 80% of the way, or 60% or 90%, you're free to jump off or get off at any time. But join us in the meantime. I think it's a great metaphor, and I think it's terrific. I'm sorry they didn't continue the nomination. At any rate, so I think that sort of thing might be a good answer to this. Nobody wants you to agree 100% on the thing. I mean, it'd be great if you did, but we don't require it as a condition for voting for us. Okay. I think, to get to another point here, about the case for the free market and the case for liberty and the case against statism, I think it's very important to do two things. One, to refute the intellectual content. That was to show that statism doesn't work. That's great. I'm not against it. I'm all for it. I do it most of the time. But there's something else which I think is also important, namely to show it's not just intellectual error. Okay, this is where I agree with the public choice people. It's not just intellectual error. People aren't that dumb. A lot of people benefit from this stuff. We have to expose the fact that they are ripping us off. And one of the advantages of this is it gets people hot under the collar, as they should do. In other words, if you say, well, the farm price support program is a beautiful example of this. It doesn't work. It's irrational, etc., etc. It's all true. It hurts the consumer. People will say, yeah, okay. And they sort of walk off. They don't really care that much. It's like my students or anybody else has students in the classroom. But if you say they're ripping us off, these are a bunch of thieves, they're looting our pocket, then they start, they pay attention, they're interested. It rouses them from their usual torpor. And so the moral argument is actually an extremely important one, and even from utilitarian grounds. For example, take the farm price support program. Okay, farm price support program is, quote, irrational, unquote. It's the old way of looking at it. Okay, you pay the taxpayer pays the farmer. Taxpayer is fleeced The government pays the farmers to produce less, or sometimes not to produce at all. And then supply goes down, prices go up. If the cheese or whatever it is stored in some warehouse for many years. In addition to all of that, the Department of Agriculture is also paying farmers to produce more, increase their productivity, to irrigate, in the old days to electrify, to increase fertilizer. So it seems totally crazy. Why is the government paying the farmers, one, to produce more, and two, to produce less? Okay? It's irrational from the point of view of the consumer, from the point of view of the economic system. It's not irrational, however, from the point of view of two groups. One, the big farmers, who get paid to produce more and to produce less. That's great. They love it. Two, the Department of Agriculture increases bureaucracy tenfold to run these programs. Okay, so we have a cozy coalition between the Department of Agriculture and the large farmers. They are ripping us off. I think this sets this thing historical point better than simply a sort of a logical critique of the program. In addition to that, okay, this brings me to my question of outreach, which of course is always every libertarian's lips. And actually, I'm in favor of everybody voting for us, okay, without exception. But then the question: who do you target? I mean, we don't have unlimited resources. Which issues do you concentrate on? Which groups do you try to get in? And I think the basic thing is you try to concentrate on people who are, in some way, are outraged at government, some aspect of government action. It's an anti-government coalition I think we're trying to build. In other words, it's not a coalition with Dan Rather. Not that I hate Dan Rather. The idea is not to convert Dan Rather. I think it's a hopeless task. Although anybody who wants to do it is free, of course, to do it. Or to convert the establishment, or convert the Reagan administration or the Bush administration. I think it's a terribly mistaken kind of strategy. The idea is to convert people who already hate the government for one reason or another. Okay? This puts us in a very different kind of focus, very different kind of footing. It also means we're probably going to be less respectable. Interest in respectability, this is not the kind of program to push. For example, one of the outrageous things happening right now is a sellout of President Bush on gun control. And President Bush, lifetime member of the National Rifle Association, allegedly opposed to gun control. As soon as the crunch comes, which means anything at all, as soon as somebody uses a gun to shoot somebody, bingo, yeah, we have to restrict imports of guns and all the rest of it. So this is a powerful program for the people out in the boonies. Okay? I admit it's not a good program for urban America. New York City, if you argue against gun control, you're a minority of 1, 2, or 3, or whatever it is. Well, so what? This is correct. Okay, you have a large number of people out there in the non-urban areas who hate the guts of gun control, and will get their votes and support. And you push and make the philosophic case. You can't be in favor of gun control and also be in favor of any other aspect of private property rights and freedom and all the rest of it. So that's just one aspect of policy which might be unpopular, but it's very important to push, and which you get the votes and support and financial support, even if a lot of people are very interested in the topic, like the extreme wing of the National Rifle Association, not the sellouts who are running it right now. Okay, that sort of thing. There are other aspects of this. I've already alluded to some of it in today's panel, this afternoon's panel. The whole drug program. Here's a beautiful example of tying in the war against drugs, of tying in civil liberties, personal freedom on one hand, and private property rights and economic freedom on the other. Because both of them are going down the tubes as a result of a totally insane war against drugs, which is not going to win, hasn't won, not going to win, it's hopeless. And the result is, of course, to get the government in every aspect of our life. It's very much like Prohibition in the 1920s. It's outlawing liquor, and then shooting everybody who mobilizing resources of government at every level to seek out liquor, pry it out, kill anybody who has a still, and all the rest of it. And it means also, of course, that it doesn't outlaw prohibition, doesn't outlaw liquor, it simply drives it underground and gets it lower quality. Of course, there's no quality control in the black market when things prohibited, so you get people dying from methyl alcohol, the poison kind of alcohol, and things like that. You don't have Seagrams selling a brand name in an illegal situation. So And the whole thing is essentially a scam whereby, well, two things. One is a scam whereby the government is on the take. I mean, the reason why we're not going to repeal the war against drugs, we're not going to legalize it very soon, is the whole darn government is in on the take. I mean, from the feds to the police to the Drug Enforcement Administration, all the rest of it, and foreign dictators and everybody else. This whole vast network, the whole business of being in on the take because of the outlawry of drugs. Ron Paul made, I think, the best single statement of his campaign, which will come back to haunt the drug war people, because the media remembered it, is if the government can't even keep drugs out of their own prisons, how can they do it anyplace else? Everybody's in a cage and they still can't battle it. So, and the result of, in addition to not succeeding on the drug front, as a matter of fact, the drug addiction problem has increased in proportion to the amount of resources the government has put into fighting it. In addition to all that, of course, they're using it in order to tyrannize over everybody's financial records, over everybody's bank account. You can't use cash. You use cash. Hey, you got a lot of cash. That means you're a drug dealer. Why else would you use cash? Why else would you use the beloved government banks? Okay, so this is a move towards a method of moving towards exchange control and trying to outlaw cash and all the rest of it. And nobody else, and people, and Ron Paul would meet media people and so forth, and government officials, even they admit this. They admit it doesn't work. They admit, and they still, of course, have to be publicly committed to the so-called war. Eventually, it's got to crack. I mean, what proportion of the gross national product we have to invest in the drug fight until the whole thing is seen as hopeless? I mean, 50%, half of the GDP going into the drug war. I mean, whatever it is, the whole thing is ridiculous. Okay, so we can be in the forefront on the drug question, which we have been. I think if we've done that, we could keep accelerating this. As an example, by the way, to get more toward economic questions, as an example of what I mean by uniting with a part of the public that hates the establishment, hates the government. I happen to live in California, the glorious summer of 1978. When Proposition 13 was passed, and it was a magnificent thing to see because everybody was against it. Everybody hated it. It's a terrible thing. It'll destroy the state government. There won't be any police anymore if you pass this big tax cut, property tax cut. There won't be any schools. There won't be any firemen. The roads will decay, and none of it worked. I mean, the whole big business, big unions, big government, our beloved teachers' unions. The whole group weighed in, the press, the media, TV, everybody attacked it. Irresponsible. How can these people be so irresponsible in favor of cutting the property taxes by 2/3, a terrible thing? And as the thing built, as the hysteria mounted, the polls began to record that Proposition 13 was getting more and more support. It's a beautiful thing. And at the end, they of course swept the victory, but no establishment support whatsoever. 2 or 3 economists, and that was about it. And as I say, it was a glorious thing to see, and if it could happen then, it could happen another time too. Of course, that was the heyday of anti-government sentiment in the United States so far, which was the late 70s, before the Reagan administration came in and co-opted the whole movement. But it can happen again, because I think one of the glorious things about what's happening since President Bush got in, with 8 years of the Reagan miasma being lifted at long last, and the sort of narcosis or whatever, the Reagan smile and the head shaking and all the rest of this. People begin to see reality once more. And what happened? As soon as Bush is hardly in office, and suddenly what happened? There's the SNL crisis, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, and Secretary of Treasury Brady comes out with a brilliant idea. The way to save the SNLs and pay off the depositors is increase, tax the deposits, bank deposits. Small tax, only 25 cents for every $100. What is it? The public won't care. By the way, here's, I think, a problem with the public choice people. They would say, also, the public wouldn't care. It's a small amount. The costs are spread over many people, teeny amount. It was a magnificent, it was a wonderful thing. One of the greatest things that happened in American politics in my memory, namely a firestorm of hatred, rose up, and in three hours the whole proposition was dead. In 3 or 4 hours, it was great because it was advanced at 10 o'clock in the morning one day, whatever it was, and by 3 o'clock. This crossfire, whatever was on, it says dead, it's finished. I mean, Democrat, Republican, doesn't make any difference. It's finished. It's idiotic. Stop. That's it. It's out. So what a magnificent thing. It's just beautiful. It reminded me, of course, in the early 80s, even the high day of the honeymoon, they tried to put them withholding tax remember on interest and dividends. That was killed also. This is a great reversion of that. Okay, the second step, which happened shortly thereafter, which is sort of like a 1-2 of the establishment, was the congressional pay raise scam. I'm sure you all remember that. One of the beautiful things in American politics. Not organized by the Libertarian Party. It caught us by surprise. and they have this whole thing rigged, so you have the so-called bipartisan commission of beloved people. I use the term beloved, by the way, if you're not familiar with this, by people who are beloved by all right-thinking people. New York Times, CBS, Washington Post. And one of the most beloved people in 20th century America was Lloyd Cutler, who was the chairman of this bipartisan commission. And Cutler, in his wisdom, as a long-time lobbyist of the public trough, of course, came to the conclusion that we need a 50% pay raise for congressmen and for top bureaucrats with judges and everything else. It's desperately needed. Otherwise, we'll lose these great people. We'll lose them. Pay them now. It wasn't a grabber. And the thing is, and it was organized, the revolution against, there was a revolution against the pay raise. It was organized by radio talk show hosts, a heroic group. Because the TV is sort of locked up, and you watch TV, you watch Donahue and all these other creeps. And the radio talk show hosts, whoever was sort of semi-libertarian or whatever, they rose up as one man practically and had this whole network across the country, send tea bags to the congressmen protesting against this rotten. How dare they? See, the point is the moral indignation again. How dare these SOBs vote themselves a pay increase at our expense? Very simple and very effective. In the 19th century, anytime Congress voted itself a pay raise, even $100 a year, they were thrown out of the next election, just like that. How dare these people do that? Okay, so the same spirit rose up. It's not dead in America. And tea bags were sent to all these people, and even White Sulphur Springs, Greenbrier, whatever, the Democratic congressman, National Committee, whatever, met, the conclave, all of a sudden they're using tea bags and tickets. And it worked. It worked. That's the great thing about it, because the one thing about Congress, I mean, we complain about a lot about Congress, of course, but one thing about them, they have to come up for re-election pretty often, so they're sensitive to public protest and pressure. That's the point. It's not the idea of begging these people. It's put pressure on them. Look, you and you so-and-so, if you vote against me for the pay raise, you're out. You're finished. And so it worked. We beat it. And it's just a great thing. Magnificent. Despite all the establishment, despite all the hokey arguments, we'll lose these great people. Of course, nobody quit. I mean, nobody... It's one of Rothbard's laws. I have a bunch of sociological laws. One of them is nobody ever resigns. And once in a while, of course, it's very rare. Okay, so these are heartening signs. These are signs that things are breaking loose again in the United States as they were before the Reagan administration. Okay, let's get to the S&L bailout, because I think that's a very interesting example of a situation where only a radical approach works. Only a radical approach is consistent. Because the gradual approach, which is taken by almost all think tanks, we heard about free market think tanks today, almost all the free market think tanks say, well, of course we have to bail out the depositors. So a government guarantee, you have to bail them out, and then you try to reform them. Now the reforms are pretty picky even to begin with. I don't want to talk about that right at this moment. I want to talk about the bailout. Nobody knows how much the bailout is going to be. I mean, the estimate keeps rising about $20 billion every month or so. It started last year about $20 billion. It's now up to about 120 or 200 or whatever. Who knows? Because the thing is, the S&Ls, a third of them are officially insolvent, and the rest of them, as far as I'm concerned, are philosophically insolvent. So it's a question of when does the reality catch up with the philosophy? It can happen any time. I think there's about $8 billion a month being withdrawn by shrewd people. Let's get out of this stuff. It seems to be collapsing around us. Let's get out and go into other things, money market funds or whatever. This is going to accelerate as the collapse accelerates. It could easily happen. So the government guarantee is very interesting because the government, this is part of the running debate in the Libertarian Party for many years over public debt. Those of us who are radicals in favor of repudiating the debt, so the answer is, gee, it's a contract. Who made the contract? The contract is made by the government with people who want live off tax loot for the next 20 years. I don't consider that a valid libertarian contract. It's sort of like a mafia contract. You and you get together, we shoot that guy over there. So think of what interestingly enough, the question of how the S&Ls will be bailed out. And everybody except maybe Mises Institute and one or two other groups are in favor of the bailout. Then the question is, how do you arrange the bailout? Well, you can the establishment says, well, half of it will be paid by taxpayers, or it won't be a tax though, of course, like the other tax on deposits was not a tax. That was supposed to be a fee. This is one of the ways President Bush fulfills his pledge of no new taxes. You don't call it a tax. Tax is a bad word. Nobody likes taxes anymore. So you use the word fee. In this case, it would be an insurance premium. You raise the insurance premium on the other banks to pay off the unsound banks, which of course pushes up various marginal banks into unsoundness, you understand. That's one way. That's half the bailout funds are supposed to come from there. The other half will come from borrowing. Well, how do you, $50 billion is the estimate. It'll be a lot more than that, I can assure you, before the thing is over. Another question is, how do you meet the Graham-Rudman limits on deficits, which is supposed to be moving down towards zero on the budget deficit question? Well, you do it by very simple advice. You just don't include it in the budget. It becomes an off-budget item. See, one great way to balance the budget is not include spending in the budget. I wish I could do that. It's an off-budget item. Or you create a phony new outfit called a Resolution Finance Corporation, something like that. And they'd float the bonds, and they wouldn't be officially part of the government, so it doesn't really count. One interesting thing is the third method, you see, which they don't mention, the way they could really pay off the depositors is very simple. Seems very simple. This is really, of course, the foundation of the Fed power, is to just print money and pay the people with it. Print the currency and give it to them. Why don't they do that? Why don't they print $200 billion and give it to the depositors and write the whole thing off? They could do it. There's no law against it. They've got the unlimited power to counterfeit, which is the Fed. The reason they don't do it is kind of interesting, because if they do it, it'd be super, hooper, duper inflationary, because people will then deposit the cash in various banks, and there'd be a 10-to-1 increase in the money supply, like that. A couple of $1 trillion increase in the money supply. They don't want to do that. They don't want to acknowledge there's a problem here with fractional reserve banking to begin with, so they don't talk about it. So at any rate, what would happen if, this seems like a hard situation, the depositors will go through the ringer indeed, take that radical stance. However, look at the great thing about it. If you allow the savings and loan banks to go bankrupt and allow the depositors to take the bath, one, it would relieve the taxpayers of $200 billion or more of new taxes or new inflation, or however they're going to hugger-mugger this. And two, our beloved depositors and savings and loan people will learn a valuable and instructive lesson. Namely, never trust the government again. It's very similar to the foreign debt question. If there's foreign debt piling up in Brazil and Argentina and other places, what to do about it? What to do about it? Just don't write it off. Okay? Which means the Brazilian taxpayers don't have to be fleeced some more, the American taxpayers don't have to be fleeced some more, and the banks will finally engage in some honest accounting, which means they'll go under. So this is the thing. It's a radical line, but it's a cleansing kind of thing. It's honesty applied to American politics for the first time in a long, long time. We had the same opportunity, by the way, to get rid of unsound banking during 1933 and the Great Depression. The banks were going under. They were collapsing as we spoke. And but we had two alternatives then. One is the alternative to allow them to go bust, and that's it. We go back to the hard gold currency. Forget about paper money and fractional reserve banking. The other route was taken, of course, by Roosevelt, and would have been taken by Hoover, which is, of course, to save the banks, go on to a paper finance standard and all the rest of it, have guaranteed deposits and all the rest of it. And some of my close friends are in favor of eliminating the FDIC government insurance and substituting private insurance, okay? Privately financed deposit insurance. Well, I'm not against it. I mean, if you want, it's like an entrepreneurial point. If you want to set up a private deposit insurance corporation, you're free to do it. Just you undoubtedly go bust. Remember what happened to the Ohio and Maryland private deposit insurance firms a few years ago? One bank was a crooked bank, and that went under. Immediately, all the other banks, people got scared, and the bank run occurred. The bank run, by the way, is a beautiful and magnificent institution, so spread like that. And once it spread, nothing can be done about it. And I think That's an instructive lesson, because the banking system is the only industry in the United States I know of which rests only on public confidence. You know, they always talk about, hey, we can't tell the public that S&Ls are collapsing because it would ruin the confidence of the public. You don't see that applied any place else. Nobody talks about the importance of confidence in the computer industry or confidence in the TV industry. They've got TVs to sell, right? They've got computers, which are good, and they work. Confidence rests on the soundness of the product, not on flim-flam and smoke and mirrors, which it does in the fractional reserve banking system. That's why confidence is all important, because they ain't got the money there, folks. They ain't got the money. Now, there's a dispute among my friends about whether the public thinks that their money is there in the banks. I mean, take a poll. I think they all think it's there. And even my students, after a semester of brainwashing, still really believe it's there. So they think the money is there. They don't think it's being loaned out somewhere and it ain't there. So anyway, that's, I think, again, an instructive lesson which should be learned. To me, the idea of insuring the fractional reserve banking system, or insuring the S&L, is very much like insuring the Titanic after it hit the iceberg. No percentage. If you're free in the free market to do it, but there ain't much percentage in it. Okay, so, by the way, free enterprise, it seems to me, I'm getting kind of irritated at the idea that if you're a small firm, if you own a restaurant or whatever, you're allowed to go under. If you're a big business, if you're Continental Illinois Bank, or if you're Lockheed or Chrysler or the S&L industry, you can't be allowed to go under. You're bailed out automatically by the government. It seems to me that free enterprise means freedom to choose, and also therefore means freedom to lose, and for the big guys as well as the small ones. Okay. Okay, I think if I haven't succeeded in alienating everybody yet, I may as well deal with two more points on the current policies and current issues. One is a thing which irritates me a lot. I don't see much opposition to it, either in the libertarian movement or free market economists. I'm not saying it's not there, I just don't see it. It might be there bubbling underground and I haven't seen it yet. Anyway, we've had in the last few years a veritable reign of terror on Wall Street. Many of us have our least favorite politician. It's very difficult. When I think about my least favorite politician, it's very difficult to decide among a rich tapestry of choices. If you focus on this guy, yeah, he's the least favorite. You focus on somebody else, yeah, he's the one. But my particular favorite is Rudolph Giuliani, the heroic Savonarola of Wall Street. Okay?
Hitler.
The scourge, the scourge of Wall Street. And Giuliani is, as you probably know, he'll probably be the mayor of New York soon. And his big thing is using the power of the state apparatus, including all quasi-illegal means, certainly unlibertarian means, to what? To combat the evils on Wall Street. What are the evils on Wall Street? Well, things like insider trading, which as far as I'm concerned means if you talk over a martini, you say, gee, Jim, I know that so-and-so's XYZ Corporation is going to merge with ABC Corporation. You're arrested. It's illegal. Somebody's spying on you. It's inside trading, evil. Lock them up. And the idea that somehow an unfair advantage if you know something more than the other guy and therefore profit from it, that's what free enterprise is. It's knowing something more than the other guy and being an entrepreneur and profiting from it, whether it's the stock market or business in general. This is a direct assault on free markets, on free enterprise, private property, and all the rest of it. It's a victimless crime, just as much as prostitution and drugs. It's a victimless crime. It also helps the economy by siphoning control and ownership of assets of corporations to the most efficient people, those who know more than the other clucks. Okay, and for this they are persecuted. Two prominent investment bankers were dragged out of their office in manacles and chains by Giuliani's thugs. And what does the public say about it? I mean, usually I'm optimistic about the public, but not in this sort of situation. They don't understand it. They're good when something taps their pocketbook, like a pay raise or something like that. They don't understand that. Something on Wall Street, they're all for it. Yeah, these guys. One of my least favorite news things on television is the man on the street interviews. I don't know whether it's the real man on the street or whether they select it that way. A bunch of bozos from beginning to end. And when they arrested some of these Wall Street insider traders, they asked these guys, "What do you think?" I think the Ivan Boesky case. What do you think of the Boesky punishment? It's too good for him. It was $1 billion fine and then 5 years in jail and prohibiting him from ever trading in security again. Too good for him. They should lock him up and throw away the key. This seemed to be the modal argument, the modal opinion of the man on the street. And if you talk about the civil liberties or property rights of Wall Street people, it seems, they're rich, who cares about their rights? I think it's extremely important for us to get into this. To me, one of the most interesting aspects of this was the New York Times headline. New York Times always tries to be very objective in their headlines and their reporting. But this time they weren't very objective, even by New York Times standards. And the big headline was something like this. I wish I could remember the exact quote. On the financial page yet, which is even more neutral than the other parts of it, was something like this. Income so big that even Wall Street can't stomach. That was the headline. And the income referred to Michael Milken, indicted for $1 billion fine, 550 years in jail, whatever the penalties are, for the crime of inside trading, plus takeover bids and all that, which I'll get into in a little bit. And the comments about Milken's $550 million a year income, okay? 3 people in particular, the New York Times quoted as attacking this bitterly. It's too much, it's monstrous, so on. One was, of course, our old buddy, John DeCount's Galbraith, who you can expect that from Galbraith, all right? Galbraith was made millions by attacking everybody else's affluence. Right? That's his contribution to social life. The other was Donald J. Trump, with all the nerve saying, you can be happy on less money than that. What gall, what chutzpah. And third, was none other than our old buddy who practically runs the country, David Rockefeller, who says, if somebody can make that much money, it shows there's a serious imbalance in our financial system. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at a situation, I think basically what we're really looking at is the old corporate elite, which has been inefficient, which has been shafting the stockholders for a long time, suddenly finds a system whereby people like Milken can finance takeover bids and get the corporation out from under inefficient elites and onto new and better owners. And so who pay stockholders more money. That's really what it's all about. People like Rockefeller are almost the embodiment of the old-fashioned corporate elite. So there's another factor here, too, which Mises pointed out years ago, namely, very rich people tend to be in favor of progressive income tax. You wouldn't think of that. But very rich people essentially live off inheritance, off inherited wealth. They don't like new upstarts coming up with labor income, which is what Milken's income was, of course. It was a percentage of commission of income he got for the firm. So you have a war between the old-fashioned inherited wealth and people coming up on the outside, fast on the outside, doing better things. Actually, the whole Milken point was made possible by the Williams Act, the nefarious Williams Act in 1967, when the corporate elites were being hit by takeover bids, so that people could get stockholders together and offer them higher money, and more money than they're getting now per share. It was outlawed by the Williams Act, and the Williams Act cracked down on takeover bids and ordered, as soon as you amass 5% of any corporate stock, you have to go public, you have to announce it, and announce your intention to have an eventual takeover and wait a certain time period to do it. This, of course, meant sort of opportunities for arbitrage and all the rest of it. And what Milken did was a tremendous financial innovator to get around by takeover, by leverage buyouts, to get around, and so-called junk bonds, to get around this prohibition. The Williams Act was passed by the beloved Senator Williams, who was then beloved, not now. The so-called education senator is always filling a congressional record with pleas for more government money education. We got caught on the amp scam affair, got tossed into the hoosegow, Senator Williams. And the takeover and the financing these bids by high yield, but really should be called high yield bonds. They're called junk bonds by the competitors, whose bonds should be called low yield bonds. Okay? If you want to be technical. Obviously, a higher yield bond would be riskier. I mean, everybody knows that. But at any rate, the bankers who were floating the low yield bonds, of course, didn't like the fact that Milken was competing with them, and very successfully. So you have these various interests trying to crush their competition and using the government to do it, and using phony moral arguments to try to do it, and apparently fairly successfully at this point. So, okay, my final, to say if I haven't succeeded in alienating everybody yet, my final example here of a current issue, which I think almost everybody is wrong on, which I think libertarians should sail into, is the Alaska oil spill. I'm sure you're all familiar with. I couldn't see anything on TV. TV news are getting to the point, all you get is medical news, and once in a while you get something of the Alaskan oil spill. I mean, I'm now intimately familiar with every study and report that's been done on cancer and heart disease and 20 other obscure diseases now, just from watching a regular news program. At any rate, here you have the oil spill. Okay, who's blamed for the oil spill? Exxon. It seems to me Exxon is precisely the type of people we should feel sorry for. Exxon loses 10 million gallons of oil, which is approximately $5 million, plus the money they have to pay, and I think correctly so, the people who lost out because of the oil spill, the fishermen, and all the rest of it. Okay, so Exxon are the losers, allegedly from allegedly drunken sea captain. Okay, and yet Exxon is being boycotted, constantly attacked, etc., etc. And if you look at what we're suffering from is essentially environmentalist infection here, because if you look at the environmentalist propaganda here, what they're saying is it's terrible. They're not talking about really about the fishermen. They're talking about the otters. They're talking about the water. In fact, the water is no longer blue. It's now white or whatever. It's now black or brown because of the oil. So in other words, but it used to be the rights of the snail darter become greater than the rights of human beings, or the rights of the caribou, or whatever. Now it's the rights of the water. The natural right of the water to remain pristine. It seems to me totally idiotic. But that's the language in which this is couched. Exxon did not deliberately dump the oil. They're the ones who lost from it. And the thing is, the economists who say, well, we can fix up this problem by internalizing the externality, by forcing, say, Exxon to pay damage. They're doing that anyway. That's not really the problem. It's much deeper than that. The last big was the Amoco Cadiz tanker off the coast of France about 1979, I think. And I don't think there was any big fuss made about it at all. It was much bigger. It was about 60 million gallons. Nobody complained. There was nothing big on television about it. They paid, I think Amoco paid about $500 million for liability. That was it. There was no big thing. Nobody boycotted Amoco and all the rest of it. And I think this is an example of the extent to which environmentalism has spread in the last intervening decade. And I think what we have with the oil pipeline, which they're trying, of course, to shut down, the big argument against it was, for many years, which held up the development, was the fact that the caribou migratory patterns would be disturbed. The caribou's got lots of land up there in Alaska. There's tundra, huge amount of land. There's lots of land to walk around in, but the projection was the caribou would be disturbed by the pipeline. Well, they built the pipeline. It turns out the caribou loved it because it's nice and warm. And they snuggle up to the pipeline for the nice warmth. So we have a group of people which have not been explored enough, I think. An environmentalist movement is essentially an anti-human movement. It's a movement which wants to roll back the Industrial Revolution, wants to go back to the primitive period when man and nature were allegedly in balance, which means, of course, wiping out about 95% of the human race. And elevating the alleged rights of animals, insects, fish, water, mountains, everything except people. Those of us who take this position are called speciesists. I prefer to call humanist. Human beings being the prime priority here. I've been writing some anti-environmentalist articles in Liberty magazine, and the last couple of weeks ago, the august chairman of the august New Jersey Libertarian Party called up the head of the Center for Libertarian Studies and demanded that he fire me as the editor of the Journal of Libertarian Studies for daring to attack environmentalism. So my friend, who's the head of the center, said it seemed to be a lot easier for him to fire himself as a subscriber. Nobody's forcing him to subscribe to the journal. So that sort of stuff, I think, has to be tackled because whereas socialism, as I mentioned this afternoon, has collapsed. I mean, it's imploded, it's collapsed. Nobody's a socialist anymore. But we have a rise in various other forms of interventionism, in particular environmentalism and other egalitarianism and other measures, hatred of the rich and things like that, which still persist. So there's lots of work for us to do, but I think the climate has gotten political climate has gotten a lot better with the retirement of Reagan to his ranch in Santa Barbara. We now have a much more flexible and open political system where you have a chance to move, and I hope we do it. Thank you very much.